Welcome to StopFake, the place where we identify fakes and debunk them to set the record straight on disinformation about Ukraine. I'm Marko Suprun, and our stories this week are: Russia attacks Ukrainian ships in the Kerch strait and accuses Ukraine of provoking the whole thing, and Ukraine shells occupy Donbas after Kerch strait attack. So let's get to the details. 3 rusty boats were circling like flies. Poroshenko wanted more corpses and became a new Ukrainian Führer. Such was the language of a more than usually aggressive disinformation wave the Kremlin propaganda machine unleashed after Russia's attack on Ukrainian naval vessels in the Kerch Strait. While the hysteria may have been ratcheted up several notches, the fakes and manipulations were business as usual. A captured prisoner was shown on television giving testimony of his alleged wrongdoing. The introduction of martial law in Ukraine was ridiculed. The person responsible for the entire dire situation was, according to the Kremlin, of course, the Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. A Ukrainian provocation planned well in advance, with consequences carefully calculated, is the central motif of all the fakes and manipulative coverage that Russian media has devoted to their attack on the Ukrainian vessels. Sputnik radio correspondent Sergei Ilyin wrote that President Petro Poroshenko directed the provocation personally, and Ukraine's ruling clan tried using the incident to solve several problems at once: get additional support from the West and from Ukraine's electorate, and to cancel the upcoming presidential elections by declaring martial law. Having captured Ukrainian servicemen, Russian propaganda proceeded according to its tradition by using interrogations of prisoners as evidence of their claims. The Ukrainian armed forces, meanwhile, issued a statement saying they fully understand the so-called testimony of their captured sailors was made under pressure, as they well know how Russian security services work. It's clear from the video that one of the sailors is reading a prepared text claiming that he consciously ignored requests from the Russian Federation. Russian media conveniently decided to withhold the fact that Russians had shelled the Ukrainian boats. Russia 24 obscures parts of the Ukrainian ships to hide the holes from the Russian shells and bullets. Ukrainian journalist Vlad Voloshin uploaded photographs of the Ukrainian ship Berdyansk with a hole in its side. "This is how they peacefully forced our boats to stop," he wrote. Russian media never once mentioned ramming one of the Ukrainian ships, although video exists showing the Russian boat charging at the much smaller Ukrainian ship and hitting it, accompanied by expletives and obscenities from the Russian captain. This video was shown on Russian television, but without sound, and it was cut off right before the Russian ship rams the Ukrainian boat. A Russia 1 correspondent explained, quote, "Russians were forced to shoot at the Ukrainians to stop those hooligans." The declaration of martial law in 10 Ukrainian regions was also heavily criticized and mocked by the Russian media, who claimed it was motivated by President Poroshenko's desire to raise his ratings ahead of the 2019 presidential election and retain power by force. According to pro-Kremlin media, martial law will only introduce censorship, neutralize political rivals, and make Poroshenko the new Ukrainian Führer. Allegations which completely ignore that the restrictions called for in the martial law legislation are to be applied only in the event of a threat to national security. After it became clear that martial law would be in effect for only 30 days, the presidential elections would be held on March 31st, 2019 as planned, the take on martial law changed somewhat. Suddenly, it was the West that ordered Kyiv to reduce the term to 30 days. Another theme of Russian disinformation concerns the regions where martial law would be enacted, provinces bordering with Russia, the sea, and Transnistria. Komsomolskaya Pravda claims martial law was enacted to punish disloyal regions where the Russian language predominates and where Poroshenko's ratings were the lowest at the previous elections. The ultra-chauvinist monarchist website Tsargrad goes even further, claiming that martial law applies to those areas where they don't like World War II-era Ukrainian nationalist leader Stepan Bandera. In the real world, Ukraine's introduction of martial law calls for measures necessary for rapid mobilization of all resources, human, military, and financial, in case of invasion or other military intervention on the part of Russia. President Poroshenko stated the regulations will not restrict citizens' rights or freedoms and will not lead to censorship, confiscation of property, or affect border crossings for Ukrainians. Against the background of Russia's aggression against Ukraine in the Black and Azov Seas and the seizure of 3 Ukrainian naval vessels, together with a crew of 23, Russia's propaganda machine churned out a series of fake stories about Ukrainian armed forces massively shelling civilian sectors of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. RIA Novosti, Ukraina.ru, Vzglyad, Snob, and even those who position themselves as liberal and independent, such as Dozhd, all unquestioningly disseminated a fake about Ukrainian armed forces massively shelling civilian sectors of the occupied Donbas territory. Ukraine's Joint Forces press office refuted these Russian media claims and emphasized there had been no escalation in fighting. Residents of the occupied Donbas also refuted claims of heavy shelling in civilian areas, with many Twitter and Facebook posts pointing out that Donetsk and its environs were peaceful and quiet. Listeners wrote and called into Radio Liberty to say that aside from sporadic shooting, there was no artillery shelling all day. Even representatives of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic, the DPR, refuted these Russian media claims. On November 25, DPR Representative Ruslan Yakubov told the Russian Interfax news agency that all was quiet on the contact line between Ukraine and the occupied territories. Quote, "We have not recorded any shooting from banned heavy caliber weapons," he said. That's it for this week. You can find more dissected disinformation on our website, stopfake.org. Look, be vigilant and don't consume fakes. And if you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, as always, send it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Marko Suprun, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.